The offseason moves are starting. The Commanders had a crazy turnaround last season. That's how it goes with a guy like Jayden Daniels. It was only year one under Dan Quinn, and now Washington has to capitalize and get the right pieces around Jayden to make the most of his rookie deal. Every indication is that he'll be a very expensive player one day. The best window to win a Super Bowl is soon, but there are plenty of moves that Washington needs to make to get there, and it's already starting. The Commanders traded for Deebo Samuel, getting another weapon around Jayden. Deebo is a good system fit with Cliff Kingsbury, and there was a clear need for a number 2 wide receiver behind Terry McLaurin. Adam Peters has been busy with other big decisions, such as re-signing Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz and releasing Jonathan Allen. This is a huge offseason for the Commanders after a surprise run to the NFC Championship. The future is very bright for Washington. Jayden Daniels is the guy. Time to figure out the rest of the roster and be a contender, but it's going to take the right moves. Washington trading for Deebo Samuel made a ton of sense. There's no doubt about it. One of the biggest needs was obviously another wide receiver. Terry McLaurin had a big breakout season. I don't think it was anything he did differently or an improvement he made, but he got a good quarterback. It was his 5th straight season with over 1,000 yards, and if it weren't for missing time with an injury as a rookie, it'd be 6. He has been good every season, but a lot of the national media wasn't quite recognizing it. He had 82 receptions and 1,096 yards. Neither of those were even career highs. The big difference came in touchdowns. He had 7 as a rookie and hadn't had more than 5 since until he got Jayden Daniels. Terry caught 13 touchdowns last season and broke the franchise record. Jayden was the X factor. He made the most with the other weapons around, but there was need for an actual number 2. Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler had big roles, but there was a piece missing at wide receiver, especially after Noah Brown got hurt. Deebo should take that role that Olamide Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown had. Zaccheaus had 45 catches for 506 yards and 3 touchdowns. Brown had 30 catches for 308 yards and a touchdown. He ended up playing well in the postseason and probably earned himself some money elsewhere. I think those 2 roles can be condensed down to just Deebo. Last season was down for him, and the 49ers struggled, but he had 51 receptions for 670 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, Deebo is a really confusing player. He is used in such a unique way. Remember, he was calling himself a wide back at one point, just because of how he was used in the run game. He did have 42 carries for 136 yards and a touchdown last season. For how useful he can be as a player, 2021 is the prime example when he was an All-Pro. He had 77 receptions for 1,405 yards and 6 touchdowns. Then he rushed 59 times for 365 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was the 49ers offense, full stop. That isn't the same Deebo now. There is the notion that he is always injured. Now, he may be banged up a lot, but he's only missed 4 games the last 2 seasons combined. I don't know where that narrative began. I assume it's from 2020 or missing time in 2022, but he's stayed on the field. The issue is that he hasn't always been super productive, but in the 4 seasons he's played at least 15 games, he's had at least 800 receiving yards. Deebo can be productive, and I think he's a good fit for Cliff Kingsbury. Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown ran a lot of screens and passes behind the line of scrimmage or quick plays. Those feel like perfect opportunities for Deebo. He is a guy who can take it to the house on any given play, and he'll be a legit receiving option for Jayden. Terry is elite, but he's not had a respectable wide receiver on the other side to prevent defenses from focusing on him. Adam Humphries and Kelvin Harmon have both been the number 2 wide receivers based on production, while Terry was carving up defenses. You might not even know who Kelvin Harmon is. Safe to say that another real threat was needed, and that's what Deebo brings. It couldn't be any more needed, and Washington didn't have to give up a ton to get him. Adam Peters has a relationship with San Francisco already, considering he was the assistant general manager there. He was the vice president of player personnel when Deebo was drafted by the 49ers. He knows Deebo well and knows the 49ers, and it only took a 5th-round pick. He is expensive and did request a trade. That will easily lower his value. He only has 1 season left on his contract at $17.55 million. Washington will pay the whole deal, and he could maybe re-sign later, but at least will help Jaden continue to develop and be a good piece for the offense this upcoming season. Washington had to make a splash after making the NFC Championship. The roster around Jaden Daniels wasn't that good, so hopefully Adam Peters is making the right moves now. After the Commanders hired Dan Quinn, the roster changed a lot fast. He brought in a ton of guys he was familiar with, especially in Dallas, like Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, and Tyler Biadasz. Even Olamide Zaccheaus, when was coaching the Falcons, and Bobby Wagner from when he was the defensive coordinator for the Seahawks. Bobby was one of the signings that I thought was a bit odd at the time. Same with Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler. Those are older dudes past their primes, but Bobby really turned back the clock and, more importantly, was a leader. I can recall some tough seasons of linebacker play in Washington, and that changed under Quinn fast. Frankie Louvu got a deserved deal and played really well alongside Bobby. It was weird seeing Bobby play for Washington and not Seattle. The one season he was at the Rams was weird too, but the leadership and what he brings to a locker room is so clear. He was an incredible leader and proved he still had it on the field too. Bobby was named a second-team All-Pro after having 132 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and 4 passes defended. I fully expected him to hang it up, but Washington is building something special, and he's coming back for at least one more ride at 35 years old. The Commanders gave him a 1-year, $9.5 million deal with $8 million guaranteed. Bobby Wagner coming back is huge. He is the leader of the defense, but before him, it was Jonathan Allen. That ship has sailed. It made plenty of sense that Washington wanted to move on from Jonathan Allen. The question was whether or not he'd be traded or released if nobody wanted him. The Commanders weren't going to extend him and even gave him permission to find a trade. He had 1 year remaining at $15.5 million with no more guaranteed money. He was a 2017 first rounder, spent the last 8 seasons in Washington with 42 sacks and 2 Pro Bowl selections. It'll be weird not seeing him on the Commanders defensive line. With Montez Sweat and Chase Young traded last year, there's been a lot of turnover. Allen did miss 9 games with a torn pec last season. It was supposed to be season-ending, but he did return for the last 2 games of the regular season and the postseason. It was a help on the line, but Washington had planned to move on. Deron Payne is on a big deal too, and the Commanders drafted Jerzon Newton in the 2nd round last year. Not only is Allen's replacement in the building, but Washington now saves $16.3 million in cap space by releasing him. It's been a long time coming for Washington to move on from Jonathan Allen, but I think it's the right decision. Washington has to construct a lot of its roster this offseason. The regime is still moving on from past guys like Jonathan Allen, and many of the dudes brought in last year were on short-term deals. Bobby Wagner was a big one on defense, and Zach Ertz on offense. At 34 years old, Ertz capped off his best season since 2019 with the Eagles. He even caught the game-winning touchdown pass against the Falcons in Week 17 that sent Washington to the postseason. Ertz finished with 66 receptions for 654 yards and 7 touchdowns. That was enough to make him the 2nd leading receiver for the Commanders, behind only Terry McLaurin. There were hints of the Philadelphia version of Ertz, and it was obvious he had plenty left in the tank. Like Bobby Wagner was on defense, Zach Ertz was a leader on offense. He was a safety blanket for Jaden Daniels and played a role in his development. He fits well into the scheme for Cliff Kingsbury. Ertz played for Cliff on the Cardinals, so the two already know each other, and last season he was actually able to stay healthy. Re-signing Zach Ertz was a no-brainer. Same with Bobby Wagner. There is a lot of the roster that needs to be improved, but those two played well and are veteran presences. Jonathan Allen just had to go. It was time, but there is a lot changing. The roster around Jaden Daniels wasn't good enough, but it's improving, and Deebo Samuel is going to help that. The Commanders just made the NFC Championship, and that could be the worst roster Jaden Daniels ever plays with. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, subscribe and follow Darren and I on other social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, at JDProdNFL. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at DIIDLAKE, where I'm always talking sports, especially DC and Virginia Tech.